Ethan Cole had never believed in the paranormal. As a second-year engineering student at Blackridge University, he trusted wires, currents, and numbers, things he could measure, things that behaved exactly as science said they should. Ghosts, spirits, voices from beyond. Those were for people who needed to believe in something after death. But all it took was one late night, one forgotten piece of technology, and one whisper that should not have been possible to unravel everything Ethan thought he knew. It started on a Thursday night in late October. Campus was quiet. Leaves skittered down the sidewalks, carried by a cold wind that smelled faintly of rain. Ethan's roommate, Marcus, had gone home for the weekend, leaving the dorm unusually still. For once, Ethan had the tiny double room all to himself. He sat at his desk, textbook spread open but ignored. His mind wandered as he absent-mindedly rearranged the clutter on the shelves above him. That was when his fingers brushed against something pushed far to the back, a battered, dust-coated radio. It was a relic from his grandfather's basement, something Ethan had taken with him when he moved into the dorm but never bothered to use. The old analog dial was scratched, the antenna bent. A faint smell of dust and old metal clung to it. On impulse, he pulled it down. The radio looked like it hadn't worked in years, but Ethan was bored, and curiosity had always been his weakness. He plugged it into the outlet and turned the knob. To his surprise, the small speaker crackled to life. Static, just a constant hiss, the sound of empty frequencies. Ethan smirked. "Guess you've still got something left in you," he muttered, leaning back in his chair. He turned the dial slowly, letting the radio drift through faint music stations, snippets of talk shows, and then back into static again. Something about the low hum filled the empty dorm with a strange comfort, but then, amid the static, a sound flickered. At first, Ethan thought it was interference. But when he leaned closer, straining to hear, he swore he caught a word. "Hello." He froze. The hiss continued, unchanged. He turned the dial back slightly, finding the exact spot. Again, faint but distinct. "Hello." Ethan laughed nervously. "Weird," he muttered, adjusting the antenna. "Probably just cross-frequency noise." But the voice came again. "Ethan." His blood turned to ice. He nearly knocked the radio off the desk as he scrambled back in his chair. "No way," he whispered. The hiss filled the silence, steady and endless. Ethan swallowed hard, leaning forward again. Did you just say my name?" he asked, half feeling ridiculous for even speaking to an old piece of junk. For several seconds, nothing. Just static, then softly, almost under the hiss. "Yes." Ethan's scalp prickled. His pulse hammered in his throat. He told himself it was a prank. Someone must be broadcasting nearby. Maybe some ham radio operator messing around with signals. That had to be it. But deep down, he knew that didn't make sense. This wasn't a two-way radio. It wasn't connected to Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. And no one, absolutely no one, should know his name. Ethan shut the radio off, heart still racing. He shoved it back onto the shelf, trying to laugh at himself. "It's nothing," he said aloud. "Just interference, just some weird thing." But when he turned off the desk lamp and climbed into bed, he couldn't shake the memory of the voice. It hadn't sounded digital. It had sounded human. The next night, he tried to convince himself it had been a one-time glitch. But around midnight, when the dorm was silent and the shadows outside seemed thicker than usual, he found himself pulling the radio down again. He hesitated, staring at the knob. Then he flicked it on. The hiss filled the room. For nearly 5 minutes, there was nothing unusual. Ethan leaned back, relief washing through him. "See?" he muttered. "Just interference, nothing to freak out about." But then, faint and stretched beneath the static, came the whisper, "Ethan." His chest tightened. "We can hear you." Ethan's hand trembled as he reached for the knob. But before he could switch it off, the voice spoke again, more urgent. "Don't turn it off." Ethan froze, the air caught in his lungs. "Who are you?" he whispered, his voice shaking. Silence, then slowly, "We are waiting." The static swelled louder, filling the room with a distorted hiss that made the hair on his arms stand straight up. Ethan snapped the radio off. The room went dead quiet. But the silence didn't comfort him. It felt wrong, as if the hiss hadn't stopped at all, as if it was still there, pressing against his ears, just beyond hearing. That night, Ethan dreamed of voices. They whispered in the darkness, overlapping and endless. Some cried, some begged, some laughed in broken, hollow tones. And through it all, one voice rose above the rest. "Ethan, we know you can hear us now." He woke with a scream, drenched in sweat, his alarm clock blinking 3:03 m.m., and from the corner of his room, faint but undeniable, came the sound of static, even though the radio was unplugged. The following morning, Ethan convinced himself it had all been a dream. He was stressed from classes, barely sleeping, drinking too much coffee. Dreams bleed into reality under pressure, he reasoned. That's all it was. But when he glanced toward the shelf where the old radio sat dusty, dented, and unplugged, his stomach knotted, because he knew what he'd heard. All day, the thought gnawed at him. Through lectures, lab work, and lunch with friends, the faint hiss lingered in his ears like a phantom sound. He caught himself glancing at blank walls, convinced he'd hear a whisper if the world went quiet enough. By evening, he couldn't take it anymore. He waited until his roommate was gone again, pulled the radio down, and despite every nerve screaming at him, plugged it back in. The static roared to life. Ethan sat in silence, staring at the radio as if it might suddenly leap at him. His hands trembled as he adjusted the dial. For 10 minutes, nothing. Just the hiss. Then, faintly, "Accident?" Ethan's chest tightened. "What?" he whispered. "Corner of Main, truck." The words were muffled, half swallowed by static. "Blood." The hiss surged again, drowning the voice. Ethan snapped the dial off, heart hammering. He sat in silence, mind racing. Corner of Main, truck, accident? It had to be nonsense. Random noise, his brain twisting patterns out of chaos. But the unease in his gut didn't fade. The next morning, he saw it. On his phone, a breaking news alert lit up. Fatal accident on Main Street. Pedestrian killed by delivery truck. The timestamp made Ethan's skin crawl. The accident had happened less than an hour after the whisper. For the rest of the day, Ethan couldn't focus. He kept replaying the words in his head. Accident, truck, blood. It hadn't been vague, it had been exact. And that terrified him more than anything. By nightfall, despite his fear, he turned the radio back on. The hiss filled the room. At first, only noise, then fire. Ethan gripped the desk. Maple Street apartments burning. The static surged louder, as though choking the words. Can't breathe. The voice dissolved into a choked sob, then silence. Ethan sat frozen, staring at the radio, his pulse thundering in his ears. He wanted to shut it off, pretend he hadn't heard, but his hands wouldn't move. At 2 a.m., Ethan's phone buzzed. Another breaking news alert. Fire breaks out at Maple Street apartment complex. Several injured. His throat went dry. The voices weren't random. They were real. Ethan tried to tell himself there had to be an explanation. Maybe the radio was picking up emergency broadcasts as scrambled signals, but deep down, he knew that wasn't it. These weren't reports. They were cries. By Saturday night, Ethan hadn't slept more than a few hours. His textbook sat untouched. He didn't go out. He barely ate. All he did was sit in front of that radio, waiting. At 12:17 a.m., the static shifted again. Ethan, he stiffened. I'm here, he whispered before realizing how insane that sounded. You hear us? Yes, Ethan said, voice trembling. More will come. Can't stop it? Stop what? The hiss roared louder, rattling the desk. Ethan leaned closer. "They'll take you too." His stomach dropped. "Who? Who's going to take me?" The voice dissolved into garbled static. Then another voice cut through higher, more frantic. "Help us, please." "Don't let them." The words broke off in a shriek. The static swallowed it whole. Ethan shut the radio off, shaking. He sat in silence, every lamp in the room burning, but the darkness outside his windows felt thicker than ever. What terrified him most wasn't just that the voices were real. It was that they seemed to be getting clearer. Each night, less static. Each night, stronger. And each time, they knew his name. On Sunday afternoon, Ethan forced himself outside for the first time in days. He walked through the crisp autumn air, trying to shake the tension gnawing at him. At the campus cafe, he ran into Laya, a classmate from his physics course. "You look like hell," she said with a half smile. "Cramming for exams already?" "Something like that," Ethan muttered. "You should take a break. Clear your head. Seriously, you look like you've seen a ghost." Ethan laughed dryly. "Yeah, maybe I have." She tilted her head, giving him a puzzled look, but didn't press further. Ethan almost told her everything about the radio, the voices, the accidents, but the words died in his throat, because how could he explain it? He wasn't even sure he believed it himself. That night, he made a decision. He would record it. If he had evidence, if he could prove what he was hearing, maybe it would make sense. Maybe he wasn't losing his mind. So at 11:58 p.m., Ethan set his phone on the desk, voice recorder running, and switched on the radio. The hiss filled the room. Minutes ticked by, then Ethan, his breath caught. "Don't listen." "What do you mean?" he whispered. "They'll find you." The hiss rose louder, like a storm in the speaker. Ethan leaned closer, heart hammering. Another voice cut through, deeper, colder. "He's ours now." Ethan recoiled, slamming the radio off. His chest heaved as silence swallowed the room. He fumbled for his phone, heart racing, and hit stop on the recording. With trembling hands, he hit play. At first, static. Then faint whispers, but not the same words he'd just heard. Instead, desperate voices. "Please help us. Trapped. Burning. Can't breathe." Ethan's skin crawled. The recording was different. And worse. Amid the cries, one voice was crystal clear. A child's voice. "Ethan, we're waiting for you." By Monday night, Ethan was unraveling. His phone recording had left him shaken to the core. It wasn't just the voices predicting disasters anymore, it was the way they changed when captured. As if they wanted to show him something no one else could hear. And the worst part, they were getting stronger. He tried ignoring the radio. He buried it under textbooks, shoved it into the back of his closet, told himself he'd never touch it again. But silence didn't save him. Everywhere he went, he heard faint static, in the hum of the refrigerator, in the buzz of the fluorescent lights in the lab, even in the pauses of conversation with friends. It was always there, like a background track to reality. And sometimes, when the world was especially quiet, he thought he heard words beneath it. "Ethan, still listening? Don't ignore us." Tuesday, 2:41, midnight. Ethan lay wide awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. The faintest hiss filled his ears. He pressed a pillow over his head. No use. The static was inside him now, bleeding into every corner of his thoughts. Then his phone buzzed. The screen lit up. Unknown caller. His stomach dropped. Who the hell calls at 2:41 in the morning? With a shaking hand, he answered, "Hello?" At first only static, then, "Ethan." His heart nearly stopped. "Who is this? We found you." The hiss surged, loud enough to make him yank the phone away from his ear. But beneath it, he caught faint voices, dozens of them, crying, whispering, screaming. He dropped the phone onto the floor like it had burned him. The screen stayed lit. The call was still connected, Slowly, Ethan bent down and pressed the speakerphone. The room filled with static, then, through the crackling noise, helpless, trapped. Can't breathe. Another voice overlapped. He belongs to us now. The whispers tangled into chaos, a storm of desperate pleas and chilling declarations. Ethan clutched his head, fighting the urge to scream. Then, one voice cut through the rest sharp, clear, and close. "Look at the window." Ethan's blood turned to ice. His dorm room window was shut, blinds drawn tight. He didn't want to look. He knew he shouldn't, but something compelled him. Slowly, with trembling hands, he reached over and pulled the blinds up a crack. His breath caught. There was nothing outside, no people, no cars. Just the reflection of his own room in the dark glass. But in the reflection, someone was standing behind him. He spun around, empty room. The lamps glowed steadily. The closet door was closed. No one was there. Ethan turned back to the window. His reflection stared back at him, pale and wide-eyed. And behind it, the dark shape was still there. His phone beeped once, then went dead. The call cut off. The static vanished. The silence that followed was almost worse. Ethan backed away from the window, chest heaving, and grabbed the nearest lamp, dragging it closer. He didn't turn off the lights again that night. By morning, Ethan knew he couldn't keep this to himself anymore. He needed help. So he found himself outside the campus library, waiting for Lila. When she spotted him, her smile faded instantly. "Ethan, you look awful. What's going on?" He hesitated, shame knotting in his stomach. But the memory of the reflection, the voices, the call, it all came rushing back. He couldn't carry it alone anymore. "You have to promise you won't think I'm insane," he said. Lila frowned. "Try me." So Ethan told her everything about the radio. The voices predicting disasters, the recording that changed, and the phone call last night. When he finished, Lila just stared at him. Finally, she said softly, "Ethan, I believe you." He blinked. "You what?" She nodded. "I've read about this before. Not your exact story, but things like it. EVP, electronic voice phenomena. Supposedly, the dead can bleed through static, radios, recordings." Ethan swallowed hard. "So you think these are spirits?" Her gaze darkened. "Not necessarily spirits. Not the kind you want to meet anyway." That night, Lila came to his dorm. Together, they set the radio on the desk, a voice recorder running beside it. "Whatever happens," Lila whispered, "we keep the lights on." Ethan nodded, though his hands shook as he turned the dial. The static surged. Minutes passed, then... "Ethan," Lila stiffened. She heard it too. "You brought her..." Ethan's blood froze. The voice had changed, darker, colder. "We like her voice." Lila's eyes widened. She reached for the radio, but before she could, another voice cut through, high-pitched, desperate. "Don't listen. Don't trust them." The static roared, drowning it out. Then, slowly, a single phrase repeated over and over, rising above the hiss. "We'll call again. We'll call again. We'll call again." The room shook with the sound, so loud Ethan felt it in his teeth. He slammed the radio off. The silence that followed was suffocating. Lila turned to him, face pale. "Ethan, whatever this is, it's not just static. They're trying to get through." Ethan swallowed hard, dread coiling in his chest. Because deep down, he already knew. And the next time the phone rang, he wasn't sure he'd have the strength not. The following night, Ethan didn't sleep. He couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the reflection in his window. That shadow behind him, unmoving, waiting. Even with every light blazing in his dorm, the static haunted him in the faint hum of the vents, the buzz of the desk lamp, even in the silence between his own breaths. And at 3 a.m. sharp, his phone lit up again. Unknown caller. He didn't want to answer. God, he knew he shouldn't. But something in him, like a hook buried deep in his chest, dragged his hand forward until his thumb tapped accept. At first, only static, then a voice. "Ethan." It was softer this time. Almost tender. "We've missed you." Ethan's skin crawled. "What do you want from me?" "To help. To guide." The voice shifted, tone deepening into something impossibly familiar. "Remember the treehouse?" Ethan froze. His throat went dry. That memory, he'd never told anyone about it. Not even Lila. When he was 8, his father had built him a treehouse in the backyard. Ethan spent summers up there, playing pirate, astronaut, adventurer. But one night, just one, he swore he heard voices whispering from the woods. His father told him it was wind. Ethan never slept there again. "You left us alone, in the dark." The voice murmured now, perfectly echoing his 8-year-old fear. "We waited." Ethan's chest tightened. "Stop. Just stop." But the voice only grew stronger. "You can't hide your secrets, Ethan. We know about the letters you never sent, the fights with your father, the nights you wished you were anywhere else." Tears stung his eyes. "Shut up." The voice chuckled, a sound that didn't belong in any human throat. "We're part of you. Always have been." The call ended with a sudden click, leaving Ethan gasping, drenched in sweat. By morning, Lila found him at the library again. "You look worse," she said, gently touching his arm. "What happened last night?" Ethan's voice cracked. It knew things. Stuff I never told anyone. It knew about the treehouse. About my dad. Lila frowned. "That doesn't make sense." "Unless," she hesitated. "Unless what?" Ethan demanded. She lowered her voice. "Unless it's not just some voice. Unless it's attached to you. Feeding off your memories." Ethan stared at her. "Attached?" Lila nodded grimly. "These things, they're parasites. They don't just talk. They learn. They dig. They make you trust them or fear them until you let them in completely." Ethan shivered. "And then what?" Lila didn't answer. That night, Ethan unplugged every device in his room. The radio, his laptop, even the mini fridge. He shoved his phone into a drawer and sat on the bed, arms crossed, refusing to move. For a while, it was quiet, but then the static returned. Not from a machine, from inside his own head. A low, buzzing hiss, growing louder until words began to form. "Why fight us when you could join us?" Ethan clutched his skull, rocking back and forth. "No, get out, get out. You're already ours." The air in the room thickened. The lamp flickered, shadows jerking across the walls. Ethan stumbled to his feet, heart hammering, and then he heard it. A knock at his door, 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Ethan's knees nearly buckled. He crept forward, every nerve screaming not to. "Don't open it," the static hissed in his head. "You won't like what you see." He grabbed the handle anyway. The door swung open, and no one was there, only the long, empty dorm hallway. But etched into the wood of the doorframe, fresh and raw, were words carved deep by something sharp. "We're inside already." Ethan slammed the door shut, chest heaving. And then his phone shoved away and the drawer began to ring. Unknown caller. The sound rattled through the silence, vibrating like a heartbeat. He didn't want to touch it. Didn't want to look, but he couldn't help himself. With trembling hands, he answered. This time, dozens of voices spoke in unison, a chorus of static and whispers. "Soon, you'll see us. Soon, you'll understand." And then, one last voice, his own voice, echoed back at him. "You belong with us, Ethan?" The line went dead. By dawn, Ethan was a shell of himself. He hadn't slept. His hands shook uncontrollably, and when he glanced in the bathroom mirror, he swore just for a split second that his reflection's lips moved before his own. Ethan's world was unraveling. Everywhere he went, the static followed. It wasn't just the radio anymore, or the late-night calls. It was everything. On Wednesday morning, he sat in a lecture hall, trying desperately to focus on his professor's droning voice. His phone was off, his laptop was closed. Yet the speakers in the ceiling buzzed faintly. At first, he thought it was feedback, but then he caught it just a thread of words, woven beneath the professor's voice. "Ethan, don't look around." His head snapped up. Rows of students sat quietly, scribbling notes. None of them reacted. None of them heard it. The static belonged to him alone. "We're close." The voice purred, closer than ever. By afternoon, Ethan couldn't step anywhere without hearing it. The whir of the vending machine in the student lounge hissed with whispers. The hum of fluorescent lights in the library carried words only he could hear. Even the water running from the sink in the bathroom fizzed into distorted syllables. "Let us in. We'll make it stop." Ethan slammed the faucet off, gripping the counter. His reflection staring back at him with hollow, sleepless eyes. He muttered under his breath, "You're not real. You're not real." But the reflection smiled a fraction of a second before he did. That evening, Lila showed up at his dorm. She took one look at him and gasped, "Ethan, you look like you haven't slept in days." "I haven't," he rasped. "It's everywhere now, the voices. The static. I can't escape it." Lila set her bag down firmly. "Then we fight it together." She pulled out a portable recorder and a small EMF meter. "If this thing is attached to you, maybe we can catch proof. Something we can analyze. Maybe even figure out how to stop it." Ethan hesitated. "What if recording makes it worse?" Her eyes hardened. "It's already worse." They set up in his dorm. The recorder blinked red. The EMF meter ticked faintly. For 10 minutes, nothing happened. Just the sound of their breathing. Then the lamp flickered. The room temperature dropped so suddenly Ethan could see his own breath. The EMF meter spiked into the red, shrieking, and the static began to bleed from everywhere at once. The vents, the walls, the floor, even the air. "We're here. So many of us. You can't shut us out." Lila's recorder picked up the chorus, the tiny machine vibrating as if it couldn't contain the sound. She stared in horror. "Ethan, this isn't just one voice. It's hundreds." Ethan clutched his head. "Make it stop." But the voices only grew louder, crashing into one another like a tidal wave of desperation. "He's ours. He's chosen. Don't fight. Let go. Come closer, Ethan." The lights blew out with a sharp pop. Darkness swallowed the room, broken only by the glow of the recorder's blinking red light, and in that darkness figures shifted. Shadows that didn't belong to either of them crawled along the walls, bending and stretching, their forms twitching unnaturally. Lila grabbed Ethan's arm, her nails digging into his skin. "Do you see that?" Ethan nodded, too terrified to speak. The shadows pressed closer, their shapes flickering like old film reels. And from their shifting mouths came one clear phrase, layered 100 times over. "We're inside already." Ethan stumbled back, his legs hitting the edge of his bed. The recorder screeched with distortion. His phone still shoved and the drawer lit up and began to ring. Unknown caller. The sound filled the pitch-black room like a death knell. "Don't answer it," Lila whispered, but Ethan was already moving. His body felt like it wasn't his own anymore, his hands reaching for the drawer, for the glowing device. The voices cheered in static. Yes, answer. Let us in fully. He's almost ours." Ethan's fingers brushed the phone, and Lila slapped it out of his hand. It clattered to the floor, still ringing. She grabbed him by the shoulders. "Ethan, listen to me. This thing wants you broken. It wants you alone. You have to fight it." For a moment, Ethan saw her face clearly, her eyes fierce, her voice cutting through the static. And then every electronic device in the room came alive. His dead laptop flickered on, screen filling with snow. The unplugged radio hissed, glowing faintly. Even the tiny digital clock on his nightstand warped, numbers twisting into unreadable symbols. The voices poured from them all at once, surrounding him in a crushing wave. No more fighting. No more hiding. You are one of us now. Soon, Ethan, you will speak with us forever. He fell to his knees, clutching his head, screams mixing with the static. Lila tried to pull him up, shouting his name, but the shadows surged forward, swallowing her voice in their hiss. Ethan gasped for air, eyes wide with terror, and then, in the chaos, one thought pierced through. If the static had spread this far, there was no telling how much farther it could go. That night, for the first time, Ethan wondered not just if he could survive this, but if the entire world could. Because if the voices could bleed into anything, they'd never stop. The storm came on a Thursday night, not inside Ethan's dorm room. Static howled from every corner, flooding the air so thick it was hard to breathe. The lamp bulbs exploded one by one, plunging the room into bursts of darkness and blinding light. The radio on his desk hissed, its dial spinning on its own. His laptop screen pulsed with waves of white noise. His phone buzzed violently across the floor, its ringtone stretching into a warped, unending scream. And Ethan was at the center of it, on his knees, clutching his head, torn between voices that weren't his own. Lila stood against the wall, recorder still in her shaking hand. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned with desperate resolve. "Ethan, listen to me," she shouted over the storm. "They're lying to you. Whatever they are, they need you to give in. Don't let them." The voices drowned her out. Join us. Forever ours. You're already with us." Ethan raised his head slowly. His lips moved, but the words weren't his. "She doesn't understand, but you do." Lila's chest tightened. "No, Ethan, that's not you talking. That's them. Fight it." His eyes glowed faintly in the flickering light, pupils swallowed in black. "We've waited so long." The voices whispered through his mouth. "One step closer and you'll never be alone again." For a heartbeat, Ethan wavered. Then his own voice broke through. "No," he choked out, clutching at his chest. I won't." The static screamed louder, the walls vibrating as though reality itself was tearing. The shadows crawled higher, spilling across the ceiling like black veins. Lila darted forward, grabbing his shoulders. "Ethan, focus on me, on my voice. You're stronger than this." But the chorus laughed through him. "We are his voice now." The radio dial snapped violently to a dead frequency, and suddenly the room fell silent. Ethan gasped, chest heaving, ears ringing in the sudden void. And then a single voice, clear, sharp, and cruel, slid into the silence. "It's time." The devices lit up at once, and Ethan knew if he let them finish whatever they had started, he'd be gone. He looked at Lila. Tears glimmered in her eyes, but she didn't let go of him. "Ethan," she whispered, "if there's anything left of you, fight them." He stared back, trembling, the storm rattling inside his skull, and for the first time, he made a choice. With a guttural scream, Ethan lunged toward the desk, grabbing the radio. Sparks flew as he ripped the cord free and slammed it against the floor. The static roared in fury, "Traitor, traitor!" But Ethan didn't stop. He smashed the radio again and again until it shattered into pieces. The voices shrieked, their sound warping into something monstrous. The laptop screen cracked. The phone on the floor went dark, and then all at once, silence. Ethan collapsed, gasping for breath. The shadows melted away into nothing. The room, though wrecked, was finally still. Lila knelt beside him, hands gripping his face. "You did it." "Oh my God, Ethan, you did it." But Ethan's expression was unreadable, because deep inside the silence, just beneath the surface, he could still hear it, a faint hiss, a whisper only for him. "We're not gone, only waiting. You'll hear us again, soon. 3 days later, Ethan was gone. The dorm room stood empty, police tape stretched across the door. No trace of him remained, except his shattered radio, his broken laptop, and his phone lying on the desk. The phone's screen glowed faintly. Recording in progress. Weeks later, an anonymous file surfaced on the internet. It was labeled Last Transmission. A grainy recording filled with static, voices overlapping in a nightmarish chorus. But buried beneath the noise, one voice repeated over and over, ragged and desperate. Ethan's voice. If you're hearing this, don't listen, don't tune in. They'll find you. They always find you. The file cut off abruptly, and then just for a second, one last whisper lingered. Your turn.